When the Sony PS Vita launched back in 2011, it seemed to have it all. Dual analog controls, a gorgeous OLED touchscreen display, an impressive lineup of launch titles and digital backwards compatibility with the PSP and the PS1. But for all of its flash and glitter, the Vita would turn out to be a huge failure in the West. Despite an initial period of success upon its release, sales quickly dropped below Sony's expectations, leading to many large publishers withdrawing support from the console. The Vita would live on through the support of many well-known Japanese developers, and it managed to remain moderately popular within the region, while still appealing to a niche market within the West. Despite the Vita failing to live up to expectations in the Western market, there's never actually been a better time to own one than right now. The homebrew community is thriving, and they really have brought this handheld up to its full potential with some superb homebrew apps, game ports, emulators, and a whole bunch more. And we're going to take a look at it all today. Now, for all of this to be possible, your Vita will need to be modded, and thankfully the process of jailbreaking your Vita is very straightforward and should take you as little as 30 seconds or as long as a couple of minutes. It's a very simple browser exploit and will basically require you to check your firmware version, update if necessary, and then visit a specific URL from the internet browser on the PS Vita. And from that point, it's just a click of a button and it's job done. You also want to grab a SD to Vita Pro adapter from Amazon so that you can store everything on an SD card. They're pretty cheap to pick up. Now, I will leave a link to a written guide in the description for a more in-depth overview, as the process could always change down the line. So it's kind of pointless me covering the process now if it's just going to change in a few months. Though honestly, it's that easy that it'll literally take you like 5 minutes, I swear to God. Once you're modded, there is going to be some homebrew applications which are very important to be able to get the most out of your Vita. Thankfully, most of these are installed during the jailbreak process, and I'm going to explain what most of them do right now. VitaShell is basically a file manager which will be essential for using and installing certain homebrew and games. If you open VitaShell when you're connected to a laptop or a PC with the USB cable and press select, you'll be able to access the contents of your SD card, which is super handy for moving files across without having to remove the SD card from the console every time. VitaDB Downloader is an app store where you'll be able to grab a bunch of useful homebrew applications, games, and emulators, and many of the things that we will be discussing in this video will also be available through here. You can filter and you can see that there are many different types of apps which are available, but I'd personally strongly advise you to ignore the game ports for now, as they won't be a simple click and install. You will need to source the game file separately, but we'll go over all of that a little bit later in the video. In terms of the app store, it's a pretty straightforward click and install. I'm going to grab Moonlight here and it installs automatically, and it is available on our dashboard pretty much immediately. Now, just a side note here, Moonlight in itself is a pretty cool application which will allow you to stream your Steam or your games library over Wi-Fi onto your Vita. Haven't used it a lot personally, but it does work surprisingly well with a strong internet connection, so it's definitely worth checking out if that's your thing. And well, what is a modded handheld system without a beautifully packaged app with the entire game library at the tip of your fingers? For the Vita, that comes in the form of PKGj, and it includes the entire digital PS Vita library. And what I just love about this app is that you can queue your downloads and do other things whilst your games download in the background, so they will actually pause if you go into a game. And also, if you press triangle and bring up the filters, you can get access to the PSP and the PS1 games which were available on the Vita Online store before it was shut down by Sony. Now, this doesn't include the entire library for those consoles, but it's a solid selection of games nonetheless. For the games that aren't available here, they are still pretty easy to manually install. You just need to grab the ISO or the image file for the game that you want, connect to your PC or laptop via VitaShell, copy the image file into the ISO folder within the PSP emu directory, and it really is as simple as that. And we'll get to how you can play PSP and PS1 games in a little bit. Now, something that is going to be absolutely crucial if you plan on playing some of the community ports, or if you just want the best performance possible, is going to be overclocking your Vita. And we can overclock the Vita using an application called PSVshell, not to be confused with VitaShell. And this is something that you will need to grab from GitHub and install manually. Once you've installed it, if you hold select and down on the D-pad, it will bring up a menu which will allow you to adjust the CPU and GPU clock speeds. And I'd highly recommend that you just max everything out. It's perfectly safe to do. It will give a nice little performance boost at the cost of a little extra battery life. To demonstrate the kind of effect that this can have, if we take Borderlands 2 for example, which is a game that runs very poorly on the Vita, you can see that at the stock clock speeds we're averaging about 20 FPS and seeing considerable dips during combat. But once we enable the overclock, you can see an immediate increase in average FPS. The only downside of doing this is that it will slightly reduce the battery life, as previously mentioned. So I would advise that you play around with it and find the best settings which work for the games that you are playing, and set up profiles around that within PSVshell, which is very straightforward and easy to do, as you can see me demonstrate. Now, one of my personal favourite apps on the Vita is RetroFlow. It can act as an alternative dashboard or as even just a games hub where you can launch all of your games in one place, which is how I personally choose to use it. You can also download all of the cover art and basically customize it to your preference. We will touch a little bit more on RetroFlow as the video progresses. Now, if you have a Vita 2000 model, aka the Slim model, you will definitely want to grab the LCD colour saturation app from VBD Downloader, as what it does is it will allow you to adjust the colour profile on your Vita to increase the saturation, and the improvement is immediately noticeable. You don't actually have to do anything here other than just click a button. It'll do it all for you. Now, it's important to note here that you will only want to do this if you have a Slim model, because if you have an original 1000 model which has an OLED display, it already has a very crisp and saturated look, whereas the 2000 model which has an LCD display, the colours are a little bit more washed out and jaded at times, but this will fix that. Another great app which I would personally highly recommend for everybody is VitaGrafix Configurator, which will allow you to adjust the resolutions and frame cap for certain games, and this can be great in combination with PSVshell to squeeze a few extra frames from your library. I should also note that this will only work with native Vita games such as Borderlands 2, God of War, Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation, which can all see noticeable performance improvements by reducing the resolutions, adjusting the frame rate cap, and overclocking the Vita. You will probably also want to grab the Custom Themes Manager. This is a community-run theme store with thousands of user-created and official themes to download. It's as simple as searching for the theme that you want and then downloading it and installing it. No restart required, and you can customize the themes to your own preference. Guys, if you've been enjoying the video so far, don't forget to subscribe, and if you'd like to support me even further, consider joining as a channel member. I have some exclusive member-only content planned for later in the month, and you also get access to all of my video essays 24 hours early and a shout out in every video. The Vita's predecessor, the PSP, is in itself a phenomenal console, boasting an impressive library of games and many excellent features such as the network play and native support for PS1 games. In many ways, it surpassed its console counterpart, the PlayStation 2. I have many fond memories growing up with this little thing, so it probably comes as no surprise that the native PSP support is one of the biggest selling points of the PS Vita for me personally. And the Homebrew community have put together a fantastic add-on known as Adrenaline, which builds on the Vita's emulation of the original PSP dashboard and effectively turns your PS Vita into a 6.61 custom firmware PSP without any limitations on all of the benefits. Now, you don't really have to worry about doing anything here, as it is actually installed during the jailbreak process, so you won't actually have to grab it separately either. Should also note here that the PSP and the PS1 games do run natively on the Vita, as most of the PSP hardware is included on the Vita's motherboard. This is a common practice which both Sony and Nintendo have employed over the years in order to achieve backwards compatibility on their home consoles and handhelds. So it is only the dashboard which is being emulated, so you don't actually need to worry about any performance drops, and you will get the exact experience that you would expect on original hardware. You'll also get access to some additional features like save states. Now, if you don't want to boot into Adrenaline every time that you load up a PSP or PS1 game, I'd highly suggest picking up the aforementioned RetroFlow, as it will remove the need for creating bubbles or booting directly into Adrenaline, and you will also get this beautiful cover flow as a bonus. And speaking of RetroFlow, if you haven't been convinced to download it already, then I'm pretty sure the next section of this video will be the tipping point. Emulation all round on the Vita is very strong, and it's well supported by the open source community. You're going to have no issues emulating all home consoles up to the PS1 and handhelds up to the DS, with some support for the Nintendo 64. To achieve this, you're going to need RetroArch, which is a front end for a compilation of a bunch of emulators, which has been ported to a variety of different systems, including the Vita. It's a straightforward install. Just head over to the RetroArch website, link in the description, download the VPK file and the data files, copy the VPK over to your SD card via VitaShell and install it, open it up and then close it, copy the extracted data files into the directory on screen right now, and then you're good to go. At this point, you will also want a copy of your ROM files for the game that you want to emulate. Go to the location on screen and find the folder which corresponds to the console that you will be emulating and copy them over to there. As I've probably said about 15 times at this stage, I highly recommend that you pick up RetroFlow if you haven't already, then at this point now, as it will allow you to boot all of your ROMs from one place. Otherwise, you will need to manually load each emulator, known as a core in RetroArch, and game files separately. Once you're in RetroFlow though, you will want to come down to the scan settings and perform a scan that will load in your games. Once that's done, press triangle and then hit square, and it will download all of the cover art for your games. It may take a couple of minutes if you've got a few games in the library, but just let this do its thing. On a personal note, I'm absolutely in love with the GBA and the Super NES games, which run at full speed and look stunning on the Vita's display. There's also a bunch of settings that you can access by pressing start and select at the same time once you've loaded into a game. I would highly recommend going through these in your own time and customizing them to your liking. So have fun emulating your favorite games. The Homebrew community have absolutely knocked it out of the park with all of these superb community-led ports that are currently available and others that are actively being worked on. You have the GTA Trilogy, Bully, Max Payne, the first 2 Fallout games, and even more modern titles like Hollow Knight, on top of a whole bunch more. Performance does vary from game to game though. GTA San Andreas runs and looks beautiful. I've played through the entire game on the Vita and it was a great experience from start to finish. It's based on the Android port of the game rather than the console counterpart, which is the case for most of these ports in fact. Hollow Knight is another game where surprisingly the performance is quite solid, though I did have to tweak around with the settings a bit to get it running smoothly, and there is still a bit of stuttering here and there. I mean, it's Hollow Knight on a Vita. That's just insane, and it's a testament to the fantastic Homebrew community who continue to breathe life into this fantastic little handheld. Another great port which has been dropped recently is the Ocarina of Time port. It runs beautifully, and there is also a 60 FPS patch and upscaling options available to push it even further. Now I don't have those installed or enabled at the moment, but you should be able to find that pretty easily online, and this is also running natively on the Vita rather than through emulation. This has been achieved through the Ocarina of Time decompilation effort, which was released a couple of years back, and it has been recompiled and optimized for the Vita hardware. Now, to get these games working, it does require a little bit of setup. You will need to quote-unquote legally own these games on either the Google Play Store or Steam, or acquire the game files from somewhere beforehand. The process does slightly differ from game to game, but the general process will be to install the relevant VPK file from GitHub or the VitaDB downloader, copy over the game files to a designated folder, and then add a line or two of text into your config file. You will want to search on Google for the GitHub page for the game that you want, where there will be a step-by-step written instruction guide for that game, and all of the files that you will need, apart from the game file, of course. I'll link the GitHub pages for GTA San Andreas and Hollow Knight in the description below, and I'll also include a list of all of the current Homebrew ports which are available right now, and also a bunch of ones which are currently being worked on for future releases. And spoiler alert, there's some pretty cool stuff coming down the line, such as Knights of the Old Republic and Jade Empire, though I do believe they have been delayed at this stage, but hopefully we get them soon because they're 2 fantastic games. And well, that brings us to the end of this video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below about the PS Vita. Absolutely loving this thing. One of my favourite handhelds that I think I've ever owned personally. The slim model, aesthetically, it's just a very nice thing to look at. Homebrew community is just thriving, as you can probably tell by the video. And yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on the Vita. Do you have one? Are you going to pick one up? What's your favourite games? Let me know down in the comments, and be sure to subscribe. Of course, there is also the option to join as a channel member if you'd like to support me further. But until next time, take care.